Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. We take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I will be reviewing the adventure anthology Stolen Hearts Love Story Heists, designed by Daniel Kahn, Dana Floberg, Alex Niederberger, Isla, Lynne, Meyer, Matthew Campbell, and Saga, Mackenzie, or Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out to me via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So I am going to presume that the reason this heist anthology is love-themed is because, A, we've got Keys, the Golden Vault, which is a big 5e adventure anthology book coming, I believe, next week at the time of this review, and it is the month of Valentine's Day, so we are having a love-themed heist anthology. This one includes 6 adventures, which range about 10 to 15 pages, ranging from tier 1 up until tier 3. We actually have like a level 15 adventure, and it's really, really cool. Absolutely professional design, amazing quality, very well designed adventures, and I think the heist is a very tricky thing to run in D&D. I think everybody wants to do a heist, both the players and the DM, but it can be a challenge to translate what ends up being a very recognizable cinematic genre, or even in book form and others, and yet to do in a tabletop RPG, it requires a lot of buy-in and work on your player's part to want to be involved in this. Everybody has to be on the same page. And thankfully, there's a pair of pages here under One Last Job, which includes helpful tips and advice on how to actually run a heist, which I presume Keys from the Golden Vault will also include some helpful notes. I have not, at the time of this review, I've not looked at Keys to the Golden Vault yet. But I think that's some really good information in here in terms of heist preparation. Basically, you reduce the, that like montage or first half of the heist movie where they have to just prepare everything, and it's got maybe some upbeat zippy music and everything. In this case, it's a skill challenge in D&D is how we've translated that here. So everybody gets to just choose their own skill and determine what they use to gather more information. The DC depends on basically the level they're at. I believe here it recommends DC 12 plus half the party's average level. Everybody gets one chance to do something, and there's some really great examples. Perception skill, you can just stake the joint out and watch people. Deception, you can impersonate a member of the cleaning crew. History, you can go to the library and look up records. There's something for everybody to try to get involved with. And then depending on the successes you make, that can be more information that you learn, which could be information about patrols, or where certain secret artifacts are kept, or maybe some traps or secret doors, or basically any more information. And yes, all of the heists here have this friendly bullet point sidebar that basically says, hey, casing the joint, here's how it works, and here's what you get for doing this. And there's also helpful notes on just failing forward. The fact that what you don't want to do with a heist, and I've been guilty of this, and I think every DM has been guilty of this, or GM, which is, hey, you guys can, and video games too to an extent, you try to start off doing the heist thing, and then at some point somebody misses a roll or makes a bad decision or risks something that doesn't pan out, and then it just, oops, you failed it, and now you've got the guards, and now it just evolves into a normal dungeon crawl basically. And this kind of says, hey, don't necessarily make every failure immediately trigger every alarm. And thankfully, a lot of the adventures in here do help with that in their design. So maybe certain guards might actually like surrender themselves, or there may be certain rooms which are more, cut off than others, or maybe, in other words, there's certain helpful tips and steps along the way that allow your party to still fail and still face some consequences without literally turning the heist into like, oh, heist is over, now it's just a dungeon crawl. Because a lot of these adventures, and this is also should be mentioned, are not dungeon crawls at all, even though we do get battle maps and things. Like, you are in a dungeony looking map, but you're not in a situation like the example they use here is Cragmaw Castle, which is fine because that's one that we are all familiar with from Lost Mine of Fendover. But that's actually not a good analogy for what you get in this adventure, because Cragmaw Castle is just an enemy dungeon that you can fight room to room if you want to. Okay, you can turn into a heist. That's a good example of how to do that if you wanted to do a case in the joint and all that. But you could always devolve that into a fight without really any consequences. That's not the case for most of the adventures in this anthology. Instead, it's like, places in town. There's like, museums or a noble's mansion or a warehouse that's, owned by reputable people, to where you can't just kill people. So this is the buy-in that I'm talking about, and something I want to say up front. This is not a critique of this anthology, but just kind of general advice to people running heists, is your players have to have that. Mine always have a kind of a chip on their shoulder and a little bit of a swagger when it comes to like, oh, I'm a player, I can push people around and do what I want, because player characters are very powerful. They really have to be more about working with people, not wanting to be caught, realizing there are real consequences that aren't just like, oh, well, I can kill everybody here. Well, maybe you could, but you shouldn't, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the themes here, is you're not going to be like, oh, we got to steal this thing from these evil wizards or something. That's not what it is. Instead, like, let's steal this ancient love letter in a museum full of people, that you shouldn't be fighting, for example, or swap out this fake cookbook because I want the real one back from this celebrity's home, who's entertaining guests and has like cooks and stuff. Like so none of these should devolve into a big battle. And I think as long as you realize that and your players realize that up front, I think you get a lot of joy out of these adventures. And I will get to the adventures. I will show them to you. But I want to just couch this as that these are not just dungeon crawls. It's like, oh, hey, and you can approach it with a heist mentality. Instead, these are like, no, these are designed to be heists and otherwise would not be dungeon crawls, if that makes sense. Maybe the final one with the whole like demon run casino, you could maybe turn that into a more traditional battle if you needed to. All right, so I'm going to go over all 6 of these anthology adventures because that's what I do. The very first one is Sending Love, which is basically a young lover has been mistakenly imprisoned after being gifted a gold bracelet. She fell in love with a nobleman, I think, and he gave her a gold bracelet, and then Daddy found out and imprisoned her because thought she was a thief, and she has no way to communicate with him, and so she hires the party to A, return the gold bracelet, and B, give the young man a sending stone, in other words, a cell phone, that they can communicate with each other, because he doesn't know what's going on. So theme of love for all of these stories, and I think the theme actually works pretty well and helps give us that rich overtone of what we're dealing with, and helps us feel that emotion with these fellow NPCs. And I actually love all of these NPCs. They do a really good job of giving me some compelling adventure hooks. If your players are into it, again, they need to care about these NPCs, care about helping them. If they don't, or they think that's beneath them, then I don't think these heists are going to necessarily work for your group. And this is a mansion one. It's pretty, standard break-in job, I think. I feel like the leader of the heist already. I love the bugbear butler named Mugsworth, who's basically the main antagonist. There is a guard dog who's really a quasit in disguise, and there's little hints and tips that you can get that realize that maybe he's not all, a real dog, and I think that's a cool little twist. And I like that there's kind of a mid RP scene where you actually meet up with the nobleman, and he's concerned, and then he tells you some more information, so you can it's not all hostile as you go in there. It just scales really well for low levels. I think it works. There's not a whole lot going on, but you're still sneaking around a mansion at night. It feels very like those. It reminds me of those old Quest for Glory games where you could choose to be a thief and you're just sneaking into people's homes, stealing shit. Like, I'm still a hero, but I'm doing this, I guess. I don't know. I'm a rogue, man, living the rogue life. So I think it's a really well designed adventure, and I appreciate that it's fairly simple and straightforward. The Queen of Tarts is the celebrity home one. This one has a really fun, eclectic group of NPCs to deal with. There's a fairy dragon out in the garden, so if you go out there, you'll have to deal with her mischievousness. And then you get a little side quest from like the gardener to go help get her garden gloves back in the middle of your heist adventure. There's a pair of blink dogs that can cause havoc. There's a red cap cook. There's a boggle upstairs. So I really like the kind of fairy theme. And then the woman, the celebrity chef, is also entertaining guests, and I love that the adventure cares about whether the party goes in there during the day, during the evening, or at night. And there's a couple things I look at for a heist adventure is, okay, have you given me information about the security system of the house, whether that's, guards on patrol or actual traps or anything, and then have you given me information about how things change in the day to night cycle, because that makes a big deal. And unlike a video game, which usually shoves you into a certain area at a certain time of day, in an RPG, the players get to choose all that. And that's part of the fun of the heist, is that we get to choose our point of entry. We get to choose, what time of day we come in and do the adventures. Give me all that information as the DM, and I think these do a very good job of doing that. So this one is the level 3 to 4, and it feels like a nice evolution of the other one, where there's a few more things going on, and it's a little more fantastical. I mean, they have a swarm of animated books at one point. Everybody has to wear like badges to not set off the traps, which is something you can learn if you case the joint properly and get all your skill checks. So that was a very nice bit of information. There's some mean old tabaxi guard at the door, because it's a celebrity house and they're always shooing away paparazzis. And the theme of love is basically the NPC giving you the quest is in love with somebody, and then the MacGuffin that you're after has to do with their either unrequited love, or actually it's usually requited love, but usually they're in the midst of maybe a breakup or something, and you can kind of bring them back together. My only complaint about how this works is, A, it makes some of the adventures feel a little bit samey because they all have that same love theme, and B, some of the adventures feel like whether the heist properly succeeds or not maybe doesn't quite make a big of a difference as it could have. I feel like it maybe goes a bit easy on the players in most of these adventures. It seems to go pretty easy in terms of like, well, even if you didn't get it, do you still tell the information, especially with the vampires, where it's like, hey, even if you didn't steal it, as long as you befriend one of the vampires, then they can get back together, and it all becomes kind of happy ending anyway. So the actual thing you're stealing, it's not like that thing is getting people in trouble or there's real consequences. So I feel like it may be a little bit too I don't know if lighthearted is the right word, but maybe I wish that some of them had a little more consequence if you actually failed in the heist. But again, that's that failing forward aspect, where you still, even if things go completely to shit, the party can still get something out of it. And by, maybe just befriending some of the NPCs along the way, they can still complete it to a successful degree. So I'm not actually including that as an official complaint. It was just an interesting observation as I was reviewing and looking at these adventures, that some of them just seem to all end on a happier note than I'm used to for adventures where they have possible like real failure states involved. And obviously a DM can change things as they want. The Diebox Reprise, this one has some interesting use of Judaic mythology and folklore, which I knew golems came from Judaic mythology. I'm not even familiar with the Diebox. I don't even remember this creature at all. This one, you're stealing a what is it? It's a music box, I think. You're basically discovering the truth of what happened in this woman's past that involved her family dying in a fire, and we think it was arson, but it turns out it was just an accident, and it's her grandmother's ghost is like possessing her. And there's a really cool aspect to this. This is the Diebox Reprise, levels 5 to 7, where the ghost actually affects the entire heist throughout. And there's a ghost fury tracker, which is like, reminds me of like playing a board game. And then the things that you do, whether you appease the ghost or piss off the ghost, will move that fury level in different directions. And then if it's if the ghost is mad at you for whatever reason, then she can like attack things and impose distractions and creepy noises, and even possess different inanimate objects and attack you with them. And if she likes you, then she'll actually like light up certain areas of puzzles you have to complete, and can cast guidance and all these other helpful things. And this one is very, very puzzly. You're sneaking into a warehouse, and then there's a model home that you're supposed to get into. It almost feels very creepy, almost like a Halloween theme more than a love theme, I feel like. Which I think could go over pretty well. With like a few adjustments, you could make this very, very creepy with the whole model home, and you're like going into like, examine. It's all like built like it was, back in the day, and you're literally tracing the footsteps, and the ghost is constantly like possessing things. So it's really different from a heist point of view. And then the golem is the guard, who's made to not look like a literal flesh golem or anything. So I think this one was very memorable and unique compared to the others. and it's just really cool. It's got some really cool puzzles in there, and that's, I guess, the Diamond Ghost. And then, of course, if you succeed, this one probably had the biggest like difference between success and failure, where if you could, succeed, and then you gain like this extra dimensional realm, and the woman can have her wedding and all this, and the grandma's ghost can be put to rest. Otherwise, it's really, really bad for her. So maybe we should hopefully succeed on that one. Yours Eternal is also a museum heist, although the other one was in a warehouse, and this one's in the museum proper. By the way, there is a little bit of an attempt to not necessarily chain them together, but I noticed it's reusing some of the proper names throughout. Like I know the undead town that these vampires were from is used in another adventure, or at least mentioned in another adventure, and then the museum here is mentioned, and so there is a little bit of connectiveness, but it's not meant to be played like a full campaign or anything like that. There's no overarching campaign here. These are more drop-in adventures. Which, by the way, frigging awesome original portrait art. If you're gonna give me art for original art for adventures, the number one I want is maps, and this one has fabulous maps, no question about it. Amazing full color VTT ready grid and gridless battle maps. And the second thing I want is art for the main NPCs that I can actually show, and especially well done here because all of the quest giving NPCs are very important, and then typically their lover is a very important NPC. So usually you'll get the quest from the one NPC, and then you will typically meet the other NPC during the heist itself. This is why I kind of feel like, while I like the love theme, it does kind of make each of the adventures feel a little bit samey. It's almost like a challenge where the writers were told, okay, they all have to be couched in this same general setup where you're given the NPC and then their lover you meet along the way, and it creates a little bit of sameness, even though the locations are very different. This is the one example where I thought if you just befriend the other vampire, then it's kind of hunky-dory. It doesn't even really matter if you complete the heist itself or not. But this one has an amazing ending to it, where you go in the museum and there's traps along the way, and there's people, and it matters if you're there during the evening or at night. And there's a cool megafauna section where there's like a illusory boulet who kind of comes at you, but of course it's all just a little programmed illusion. But then when you get to the end and you touch like this creepy statue, which is trying to call you to touch it when you get to the very final thing you're supposed to steal, this shadow comes out, goes downstairs, and possesses this Hydra skeleton that immediately starts attacking all of the people there. So suddenly you've got basically this crazy boss battle in the middle of your heist. I love it when they introduce complications, because I think that's a big part of the heist. The best plans go to hell once you're actually doing the thing. And there's a good example of a few of them, like in the warehouse one. Once you enter a certain point, then the other person comes. Some of them take advantage of a time tracker where, hey, at this point, once you enter in here, then, tick away at this time. And then as the players fail, instead of immediately going into, oh shit, well now we're just, in combat, instead you start ticking down the clock, and you can, and even suggest in some cases, leave that visible so the players are aware of that and aware of their time. And thus, when the time ticks down, so you can accrue a number of failures, in other words, before things really get bad, and then things change. Usually, a boss shows up or something where you go into dire, like we need to get this done right now, or we're having to fight our way out kind of mode. So I appreciate that, and I think that one has a pretty cool ending involved. With all my heart, this one, I love the initial setup. I don't love the adventure, and in fact I would even argue this one doesn't even feel like a heist to me. I love that it's a lich who has fallen in love with a paladin, classic story. And the lich, and they've grown apart, which again is very similar to a lot of the setups go, where it's the lovers are quarrel or something. And the lich gave his literal heart, I guess still calcified heart, does mention, to the paladin. The paladin chose his job over the lich. And that's awesome. I love the setup. It's fantastic. In fact, if you notice, we're working for liches, we're working for vampires. When I get to the last one, we're going to work for a goddess. Like, fucking awesome for the latter half of your D&D career. That's cool. What's less cool is the fact that this doesn't really feel like a heist. Instead, the paladin is there taking this big 8-hour ritual, and the party has to basically just do all of these trials, and then by doing the trials, they can get into the final area and steal the thing. The trials are fine. They involve a variety of, there's a puzzle, and there's one that just transports you into a combat zone, and then there's a bunch of skill checks. So they give a nice variety of things to do. It's not like the example I was going to think of is the Rime of the Frostmane trials, which were so not very good. I had to redo them in our campaign. So I like that aspect, but it doesn't really feel like a heist. You're just kind of linearly, going through the motions of this dungeon and activating the rooms. It does have probably the best story of all the adventures, because each of these trials, you end up going through the past of this ill-fated couple, I guess, in terms of their first meeting, and then they're, falling in love, and then I think they finally break up by the fourth one. So you really feel invested in that story, but it still doesn't really feel like a heist to me properly. And I think this one is just a little, I think it's a good dungeon. It just feels less heisty than the other ones end up being. And then we go to Misfortune Favors the Bold. I love this adventure. If one adventure is gonna sell you on this anthology, and honestly, I think they're all pretty good. They range from pretty good to great. This one is freaking fantastic. This is the tier 4, party level 15 to 17. I guess technically upper tier 3. This one, you are hired by the goddess Soon, or Soon, to get back her lover, who has unfortunately been drawn in to an extraplanar casino called the Fortune's Favor, which is run by Bashaba, goddess of misfortune. That's awesome. And this casino is all kinds of dark and creepy and evil, even though the first floor is, of course, basically just a regular casino. But the outside of it's full of, I picture that scene in Little Mermaid, which I just recently watched with my 2-year-old, when you see like all the husks of like the seaweed looking creatures, and they're all the people who, couldn't pay up and broke the contracts and were reduced to these husks. That's basically what's happened to Liar and a bunch of other people. They're kind of wandering around the courtyard. Look at this freaking map, by the way. Saga, I think, did this map. It looks like their art style. It looks so good. In fact, I think Saga did this adventure as well. So I love the setup where you have to rescue the person, but the person can't be rescued. Instead, you have to get 3 of her things back, which is like her diadem, her memories, and her soul, because this is a horrible casino. The first floor is just, you bet all your shit like normal. There's a bunch of mini games here. The players can, of course, engage in everything, and they're going to want to do that because that's fun. There's cheating you can do. There's all kinds of rules for all that, which is great. The second floor is very creepy. There's an Ooblex and a succubus who are running this machine that lets you bet your own memories, and of course the demons are feasting on them. And then the third floor is where you've got the actual souls are encased behind walls of force, and you meet the final management, which is a cool boss battle where each one of these 3 things, a Merilith, an Ooblex, and an Alu Fiend Exarch, all want something from the players. And you can choose to bargain with some of them, but if you end up not bargaining with all of them, and Oblex, of course, wants to feed on your memories, then you'll have to battle them. And then depending on all these misfortune tracker it uses, which is kind of like the Ghost Fury one, that'll determine what extra abilities the boss fight gets. So this one feels, if there wasn't a casino heist in here somewhere, I would have just thrown this whole thing in the trash, and I wouldn't have done that. But still, I'm glad there was one, and it's so well done. It's fantastic to take the classic casino heist, turn into a high level, super fantasy D&D, like crazy creatures and evil shit going on here, and still make it a heist where you have to steal multiple things from basically each of the floors. So one of them you have to steal from the vault, the other one you have to steal from the memories, and finally you have to get the souls back. So they require multiple tasks, and then to basically also be able to include a final boss fight at the end. Feels very, very cool and has an awesome map to go with it. And really, they all have great maps. The map art is absolutely fantastic. The production value is fantastic. The artwork, it's all absolutely gorgeous. And I think this is an absolutely stellar product. All right, over my pros and cons for Stolen Hearts. Pros, 6 drop-in mini heist ventures ranging from tier 1 to tier 3 with a pretty awesome variety of locations and tasks to do, and just the fact that we actually included tier 3 makes me very happy, because I think too many D&D things just focus on levels 1 through 11, including Wizards of the Coast themselves. Pro, helpful tips on running heist adventures such as casing the joint and failing forward. This is a very important 2 pages. I almost kind of wish there were more pages here, because I think the heist is a thing that most players and DMs want to do, but nobody is quite sure of maybe how to approach that. And I think, hell, you could release a whole book on just how to properly run a heist thing. But I do appreciate that it's succinct enough that I'm not inundated with all this new information. I can just take the case in the joint is a skill challenge. I make sure not to immediately, go into a failed state and just have it be, guards coming everywhere if they fail once. Like, those are pretty easy to learn as a DM. And then I like that these adventures specifically apply all of that things in their adventures. Most adventures make use of interesting trackers such as Ghost Rage or Misfortune points, or a specific time constraint such as trackers that tick down that affect the heist's success and failure. So that, I think, is a big execution of failing forward, is by giving these different trackers that can really manipulate throughout the adventure, and then end up coming to a pretty good consequence by the end of the adventure. Makes it feel like the players are succeeding along the way or failing along the way, and have something to show for it, even if things go completely badly, which more than likely they very well could be, they can at least still fail forward. Full color VTT ready battle maps. Absolutely huge thumbs up to this awesome artwork, because if you think about it, the heist is a dungeon crawl, right? Like, the whole thing takes place in a location, and you're going to spend a lot of your time in that location, especially because we're just basically doing that entire first half of the movie as a single skill challenge with the party, so it's not going to take nearly as long. And you need to have, especially those of us who are running VTTs, awesome battle maps to go with that, because we're going to spend the majority of our adventures on this screen. And beautiful original portrait art for NPCs in each adventure. That's not the fact that every single NPC gets a portrait, but the most important ones, which are in all of these, the two lovers, they do get original portrait art, and that is absolutely fantastic, because that really helps just, sell that emotional bond that the players need as that buy-in to being able to play all of these heists, which is one of the most important ingredients, I think, into doing a heist. Is they can't come at it like a typical smash the doors in dungeon crawl. They need to care about the people, and care about succeeding, and care about the consequences of not succeeding. Pros, I really don't have any formal cons, I guess. Cons, I say cons or pros? Cons. I don't have any formal cons with this adventure. I had a few nitpicks here and there. I liked some of the adventures more than others, but honestly, I think all of them worked very well as designed. They all fit that love theme. Obviously, there are some drawbacks with having them all in the love theme. Some of them feel a little samey. Maybe some of them feel more heisty than others. But they're all, I think, well designed and well executed from just a pure dungeon crawling without the dungeon, if you know what I'm saying, standpoint. And then, gosh, the production level and everything else is just so stellar that I don't think I have any complaints really at all to give for this anthology. Final verdict: the theme of love creates rich storytelling opportunities as the Heists of Stolen Hearts show off a variety of intriguing locations, fun NPCs, and memorable moments. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.